You're standing in the middle of a shopping mall. Bright lights. Weekend crowd. People carrying glossy bags stuffed with gifts. It's supposed to be a happy day, birthdays, celebrations, surprises. And then suddenly it's not. Voices rise. Accusations fly. Security steps closer. And what should have been a simple exchange of presents turns into something that sounds a lot more like a public meltdown. That's exactly what brought two former partners into the courtroom of Judge Judy. A man insisting he never threw a tantrum. A woman claiming he absolutely did, loudly, embarrassingly, and in full view of mall shoppers. But this case wasn't just about mall gifts. It was about control, expectations, and what really happens when a relationship ends but emotions don't. Let's break down what happened. The plaintiff, a woman who had recently ended a rocky relationship, walked into court with a clear story. She said her ex-boyfriend had a history of dramatic reactions when he didn't get his way. According to her, the final straw happened at a mall where she had agreed to meet him to exchange gifts that had been purchased during their time together. She claimed what was supposed to be a calm exchange turned into a scene. He allegedly became angry over which gifts belonged to whom, accused her of trying to cheat him out of money, and, in her words, threw a tantrum in the middle of the mall. The defendant saw it very differently. He denied ever throwing a tantrum. He said he was simply standing up for himself. According to him, the plaintiff was the one trying to manipulate the situation by keeping items he had paid for. He insisted he was calm, rational, and unfairly painted as unstable. Now here's where things start getting interesting. Because in small claims court, especially in front of Judge Judy, it's not about who sounds more emotional. It's about evidence, receipts, text messages, proof. And Judge Judy made that very clear from the beginning. She asked the simplest question first. Who paid for what? It sounds basic. But when couples shop together, especially in relationships where finances are blurred, that question becomes surprisingly complicated. The plaintiff claimed several of the gifts were bought with her credit card. The defendant argued that even if her card was used, he had given her cash. There were no clear written agreements. No formal understanding about ownership. Just assumptions. And assumptions, as Judge Judy often reminds people, are not contracts. The tension in the courtroom wasn't just about money. It was about credibility. The plaintiff described the mall incident in detail. She said he raised his voice. She said he followed her from store to store arguing. She said security guards watched the interaction. She claimed she felt embarrassed and intimidated. The defendant shook his head through most of it. He told Judge Judy that he never yelled, that he never caused a scene, that he was simply demanding fairness. He even suggested the plaintiff exaggerated the story to gain sympathy. Judge Judy leaned forward, studying both of them carefully. If you've watched the show before, you know she doesn't tolerate theatrics. She cuts through emotional storytelling quickly. And in this case, she zeroed in on behavior. She asked him directly, "Did you raise your voice?" He hesitated, and that hesitation mattered. Because when someone confidently denies an accusation, the answer comes quickly. The delay suggested something else. Maybe not a full-blown tantrum, but not complete innocence either. The plaintiff then introduced text messages exchanged after the mall incident. In those messages, the defendant appeared frustrated, defensive, at times sarcastic. He accused her of stealing his property. He complained about being disrespected. Judge Judy read them silently. When she finished, she looked up and asked him, "If you were so calm at the mall, why are you still so angry in these messages?" That question shifted the energy. The defendant tried to explain that he was upset because he felt cheated. He insisted anyone would be frustrated if their belongings were being withheld. But here's where the case became less about the mall and more about maturity. Judge Judy pointed out something critical. When relationships end, people don't always get back every emotional investment they made. Gifts, by definition, are usually not conditional. If you give someone something as a gift, it belongs to them, even if you break up the next day. The defendant argued that some items weren't gifts yet. They were purchases intended to be given later. Therefore, he believed ownership hadn't fully transferred. It was a clever argument. But Judge Judy wasn't impressed. She asked for proof of intent. Were the items wrapped? Had they been formally presented? Were there messages saying, "This is yours"? The answers were vague. The plaintiff maintained that the items were purchased during the relationship with the understanding they were for her. She believed they were hers from the moment they were bought. The defendant insisted there was no such agreement. And that's when Judge Judy did what she does best. She simplified the chaos. She broke it down to this. If you buy something for someone, using your own money, but never clearly give it to them, ownership can be disputed. But if it's purchased as a gift and treated as such, reclaiming it later simply because you're angry is not how adult relationships work. Then she returned to the alleged tantrum. Because while the property dispute mattered, behavior mattered more. She asked the plaintiff whether mall security had been involved. The plaintiff said no formal report was filed, but security approached them because their argument drew attention. The defendant quickly jumped in to say that security never told him to leave, never warned him, and therefore there was no real scene. Judge Judy stopped him mid-sentence. Just because security didn't arrest you doesn't mean you weren't behaving badly. That line hit hard. The courtroom audience reacted. The defendant looked stunned. The judge then explained that public behavior is about perception. If multiple bystanders notice an argument, if security feels the need to approach, that alone suggests the volume and intensity were high enough to disturb the peace. The defendant tried to shift focus back to money. But Judge Judy wasn't done. She observed his body language, his tone. Even in court, he appeared defensive and quick to interrupt. She pointed out that the way someone behaves in her courtroom often reflects how they behave elsewhere. He denied being aggressive. She calmly responded that aggression doesn't always mean physical intimidation. It can be verbal pressure, following someone around, refusing to disengage. The plaintiff nodded quietly. Judge Judy asked her one final question. "Were you afraid?" The plaintiff paused. She said she wasn't physically afraid, but she felt overwhelmed and embarrassed. That distinction mattered. This wasn't a case of violence. It was a case of emotional escalation. Judge Judy ruled carefully. On the financial side, she examined the receipts presented. Some items were clearly purchased with the plaintiff's card. Others lacked documentation from either party. In disputes like this, the burden of proof lies with the person making the claim. If the defendant couldn't prove he paid for specific items or that they were never gifted, he couldn't demand compensation. And that's exactly what happened. For items with no clear proof, she sided with the plaintiff. For any items where the defendant could demonstrate payment and lack of delivery as a gift, she considered partial reimbursement. But the bigger takeaway wasn't the dollar amount. It was the lesson. Judge Judy delivered it bluntly. When relationships end, dignity matters. You don't reclaim affection through receipts. You don't repair pride by arguing in public. And you certainly don't strengthen your legal position by behaving poorly. The defendant maintained until the very end that he never threw a tantrum. But Judge Judy reframed the issue. "Maybe you don't call it a tantrum," she said in essence, "but if you're raising your voice in a mall over shopping bags, it's not exactly dignified." The audience chuckled. The case closed with a ruling that partially favored the plaintiff, primarily because she had stronger documentation and because the defendant's credibility had taken small hits throughout his testimony. As both parties exited, you could feel what the case was really about. It wasn't about mall gifts. It was about ego. When two people break up, there's often an invisible battle over who lost and who won. Demanding items back can feel like reclaiming power. Denying wrongdoing can feel like protecting pride. But in a courtroom, feelings don't outweigh facts. And in this case, facts were thin on the defendant's side. The lesson here is surprisingly practical. If you buy a gift for someone, understand what that word means. If you want conditional ownership, put it in writing. If you break up, handle exchanges privately and calmly. And if you ever find yourself arguing in public over shopping bags, ask yourself whether the money is really worth the image you're creating. Because once you're standing in front of Judge Judy, insisting you never threw a tantrum, the only thing that truly matters is whether your behavior tells a different story. And in this case, it did. What started as a mall gift exchange ended as a courtroom reminder that adulthood isn't measured by how loudly you defend yourself, but by how calmly you handle losing something you thought was yours. And that's why this small claims dispute turned into something far more memorable than a simple refund argument. It became a lesson in pride, perception, and the price of public emotion.